This is a video about soldering your fan to whatever you want to use to connect it to a power supply. In this case, I'm going to use this. You can take a USB cable apart and solder it directly to a USB cable. First thing I'm doing is I'm tinning the wire, then putting a layer of solder along the wire itself. This helps make sure that you get a good electrical connection. I also put something down to protect what I'm working with. Especially I don't want anything getting into that fan. That's an area that's really important to protect and be conscious of. And I'm going to braid the other wire. Of course, I don't want this to slip away from me while I'm soldering. That could create problems. Okay, so now I've tinned the wire. Next step is to solder the wires together. Thicker wires will tend to store more heat, so it'll take a little longer to cool. Trying to get this wire into position for gluing. Masking tape isn't going to work here, so I will try some duct tape. I think this might work a little bit better. And I do have a window open because fumes from soldering, not the best thing to breathe. Folding this over so that I can peel it away more easily. Now what I'm trying to do is just get the wires that I want to solder lined up. Now that they're lined up, I'm just going to apply a little bit of solder to them. I already have some solder on them. And weld them together. The greater the difference is in temperature, the more quickly heat tends to move from objects. So when the solder is actually hot enough to melt, it moves heat to the air much more quickly. So right now it can still be a little bit hot, but it cools down enough for the weld to become solid pretty quickly. Usually only takes about a second. And now I will solder the other wire. And get this in position. All right. Okay, coming apart on me, like that. Alright, so try to get these wires to line up. And they're being a little bit raspy. Raspy means difficult and mischievous sort of way. Alright, have that. I think I picked that word up from watching Warner Brothers cartoons as a kid. Elmer Fudd always talk about the raspy rabbit. Alright. There we go. There's also a good amount of surface tension with a lot of melted metals. Metals essentially seas of electrons swimming around relative to them positive atoms, and there's a lot of surface tension between metals that kind of keeps metals together. And so even when you melt them, suppose maybe hydrogen theoretically is a metal with really low surface tension when it's cooled. I'm not sure about that. I have to look more into the definition of what a metal is. But in general, metals that you'll come across and work with, if they are melted, will have a fair amount of surface tension, and that's what drew. So when you're working with solder, the solder will tend to get drawn to itself, and that helps with working, helps it go to where you want it to go when you're working with it. Looks like we have that weld, and I will leave it at that. This has been a video about how to connect your motor to whatever you're going to use to connect it to the power supply, which in general you could solder it to USB cord. For me though, this was a better option.